So as I said, good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you this morning to what is the first in a series of bite-sized mini webinars, and the first one titled National Apprenticeship Employer Incentive that we're delivering in partnership with the Sheffield College. So this is, as I say, the first in the series. What I will do is shortly I will hand over to Steve Elliott, who is Vice Principal for Apprenticeships at the Sheffield College, and Steve will be running you through how employers can employ new apprenticeships and access the employer incentives. Following that, we will be joined by Paul Edwards, Senior Business Development Manager at the Sheffield College. He'll join forces with Steve, and we will be able to take questions and answers from the floor. So within that, as I say, I would just ask that participants do put themselves on mute for this stage in the process. When it comes back to questions and answers, if you can raise your hand either in the screen, raise your digital hand if you're used to using Zoom, etc., or type in the chat box. We'll make sure that we can obviously take questions in an orderly fashion, and we'll direct those to Steve and Paul. So without further ado, Steve, I shall hand over to yourself.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome everybody. And as Tom said, this is going to be the first in a series of technical webinars where we'll be discussing certain topics on apprenticeships. So as Tom said, the first one is on employer incentive payments. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully that comes up. You just let me know, Tom, that people can see that. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the agenda today. So I'm going to talk through incentive payments for employers, and also I do want to touch on the launch of the Redundancy Support Service for Apprentices, or RESA as it is known. And then, as Tom said, Paul will be joining me, and we will take any questions at the end from any of our delegates. Okay, so first of all, the incentive payments will be paid directly to employers. So it's very key that employers understand that the payments don't come via the college; they do come directly to the employer from the government. So the running period from that is the 1st of August this year until the 31st of January 2021. I have added in brackets there that this information is in the employer funding rules. So for people's information, so there are 3 sets of funding rules. There's one for main providers, employer providers, and employers. And because the payment comes directly to the employer, all this information is available in the employer funding rules. So to qualify, the apprentice must be a new employee to the business. Therefore, they must have an employment start date between the 1st of August and the 31st of January. Employers can claim incentive payments as of the 1st of September. So even though you may have had a new apprentice in August, claims could only be made from the 1st of September. And that was due just to the system being set up by the government. And all claims must be made by the employer by the 30th of April. I have put a note at the bottom of the screen there just to inform people that irrespective of when the apprentice starts, and I'll come to how the payments happen in a minute, no actual payment will be received until January. So there's 2 levels of payment. So apprentices aged 16 to 24, the payment will be £2,000, and for apprentices aged 25 plus, the payment will be £1,500. I do want to stress at this point that there is a current payment of £1,000 for employers who employ an apprentice between the ages of 16 and 18. That payment does still exist. Okay, so this isn't a replacement to that. This is additional to the current payment received by employers. So the employer must claim this through the Apprenticeship Service. Now, what that means is that the Apprenticeship Service is paying the employer direct. It's not through the normal procured non-levy contract that you have with the SFA. I'll expand on that in future slides. The payment were made directly to employers in equal instalments, so that's in learning at day 90 and after 1 year. But as my note on the previous slide, please be mindful that that first payment won't happen until January. And the employee must not have been employed by the employer within 6 months prior to the contract start date. So that is to ensure it is for new employees. It's not for the upskilling of existing employees or somebody who has recently been with the business. There's no limit to the number of incentive payments, although for non-levy employers, there is a cap on the number of starts. So they have increased that cap. It was 3, it is now 10. So anybody claiming incentive payments as a non-levy employer, there is a cap on 10 apprentices. Apart from new starts, the only apprentices who are actually eligible for the incentive payments are apprentices that have been made redundant. Now, the bottom bullet point, this is taken directly from the employer funding rules, and it does state that where an employer has already received 1 instalment payment, okay, the new employer, okay, or the original employer will not be able to receive any further payments. So what's key to that is that if an employer has employed, say, an apprentice in August and claimed an incentive payment for them in January, that apprentice is then made redundant. The new employer can't then claim any further payments for that apprentice. Okay. So the Apprenticeship Service, the employer is required to sign a new declaration confirming that they are claiming, and indeed the new apprentice is a new employee. In terms of evidence for that, the employer needs to be able to record the apprentice's date of birth, have a copy of the apprenticeship agreement, apprentice's employment contract, including the actual start date, and confirmation that they are a new employee and they've not been employed by the organisation within 6 months. So that evidence can be taken from payroll, recruitment documentation, etc. And if relevant, confirmation that the apprentice had previously been made redundant from their apprenticeship before the 1st of August, and so that they are not eligible by another employer to claim the funding. And you must also record a notice of their dismissal stating the reason for their redundancy. So I just want to touch a little bit on the Apprenticeship Service. So the Apprenticeship Service became live in around April 2017 and was set up originally for levy-paying employers. They changed the ruling on that, where they are requiring non-levy employers to also receive payments through the Apprenticeship Service. That rollout was intended for October 2020. They changed that because of the recent pandemic and moved that back until April 21. But to receive the incentive payments, all non-levy employees must register onto the Apprenticeship Service. Once registering on there, it's absolutely key that the employer reserves funds for that apprentice. Okay, your provider can do that registration for you, so your provider can support you with that. And the claims for incentive payments need to be made by the employer. So it's not, the claims aren't made by the provider, it is the employer that do make those claims. Just to touch on the launch of the Redundancy Support Service for apprentices. So this was a government initiative in light of the recent pandemic and the drop in the number of apprentice starts, and a realisation that there could be apprentice redundancies because of the economic impact. So the service was set up, known as RESA, to help redundant apprentices identify new opportunities and receive support in terms of their redundancy. So it's made up of three main elements: providing apprentices with the advice and guidance on the impact of redundancy, signposting apprentices to local and national support services. And the key one here for employers is they want the service to be an apprenticeship vacancy sharing service where redundant apprentices can be made aware of new opportunities. So with that in mind, so the service does offer support with financial, legal and health and wellbeing support, but employers are encouraged to register with the service so that they can advertise your vacancies on the service so that apprentices who have been made redundant are aware. I have put a link there at the bottom of the screen. That link will take you directly to the RESA front page, and there is a further link there that will take you to the direct Gov site that will enable you to register onto the service. There has been a new rule brought in for redundant apprentices this year. So this rule is for main providers, so it is in the main provider rules. So should you employ a redundant apprentice, there is now a minimum amount of information that you as the employer, and if it was a new provider, should receive from the previous provider regarding that apprentice's progress. So the minimum information that should be provided now is the details, level and subject, the start date and planned end date, the percentage of the apprenticeship completed, and a summary of the knowledge, skills and behaviours that have been developed and evidence. And where apprenticeships do contain a mandatory qualification, evidence of the qualifications that have been completed or part completed and or the units achieved within that qualification. So that is to help employers and any new provider to accurately gauge the starting point of that apprentice with you, and so that the funding can be negotiated and the right level of funding drawn down for the apprentice to complete their apprenticeship. Okay, so that was a quick run through of the new incentive payments and the redundancy service for apprentices. I have put the Sheffield College employer contact there, so all employer inquiries do please use that email and that will be distributed to the appropriate person. I've also dropped my email at the bottom of the screen there should you need to contact me directly for any clarification. Okay, thank you for listening, and we'll take questions.
Thanks for that, Steve. And if I can just ask you to stop sharing your screen so we can go back to participant view, that would be fantastic. So as everyone's there in front of me, well, welcome back. I hope that was a useful overview. I think Steve's given us a lot of content there to absorb on board. I'm already seeing, I think, a digital hand that's been raised by Tim. So in first instance, Tim, if I can ask you to unmute yourself, and if you'd like to raise a question to both Paul and Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. Morning, everyone. Morning, Steve. I hope you're all right. Nice to see you again.
And you too.
I'm interested in the RESA thing, actually. As you know, I've been sort of out of the game a little bit, so I'm playing a bit of catch up now. And I was interested in the point about that service, about sort of helping those redundant apprentices find placements. And it was a sort of a technical question, but if an apprentice was made redundant prior to these new incentives kicking in and then became a new apprentice for the other employer, would they be able to access the full range of grants if they haven't been accessed by the previous employer?
Yes, they can. So depending on the length of time left on the apprenticeship programme, obviously they would need to be on programme for longer than 90 days to receive half of the payment, and then on programme for longer than 1 year to receive the full payment. But yes, redundant apprentices that have been made redundant prior to the 1st of August this year are eligible for all of the incentives.
Yeah, excellent. Can I ask a follow-up question, if that's okay?
Yeah.
In terms of the funding, so this, and I was aware this new funding is paid directly to the employer, and the previous incentive payments used to come through the provider, didn't it, at set points? Is that still the case, or is all incentive payments now direct to the employer, not through the provider, or is it split?
No, the previous incentive payments still come through the provider as it's always been, and it's only the new incentive payments that are now paid directly through the Apprenticeship Service.
So that new incentive payment, when that finishes, it'll just go back to the old system of the, what was it, the £1,000 via the provider at set points through the year.
Yeah, right. It is, and that's why I really wanted to make it clear that, you know, it's absolutely key that for employers to receive the incentive payments, they need to get onto the Apprenticeship Service, and they need to reserve funds. Okay, so just to expand on that a little bit, so when an employer reserves funds for an apprenticeship vacancy, those funds stay available for 3 months. If in that 3 months time period you haven't recruited an apprentice to that vacancy, you will then need to reapply for those funds. Okay, but those funds must be reserved to claim the incentive.
Excellent. Right, that's brilliant. That's all from me. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, cheers, Tim. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. And thanks for starting off the Q&A. That's sometimes the hardest part to get going. So with that said, I'd like to open up to the rest of the participants. If anyone else would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand. You can. Perfect. Lynn, hand over to yourself.
Hi there. Thank you for that. Really, really helpful, actually. We've just recruited three apprentices. So they've already started with us, and I wasn't entirely aware of this additional funding, but is this something that, when you mention reserve funds, I don't think that's something that we did prior to recruiting them. So does that mean we can't do it, or?
It doesn't, but it does mean a bit of a backtrack. So providing you recruited those apprentices after the 1st of August, okay, their start date was after that point, you can do a backtrack, because obviously, you know, some of the funds you know, haven't been reserved by some of our employers initially. You know, people weren't fully aware. So we are in the process of working with our employers to be able to do that. I don't know if you want to come in at this point, Paul, and just build on that backtrack process.
Yeah, I mean, we can still do it, and we'd obviously have to review the paperwork that you've done just to make sure it's all aligned, really. But as Steve mentioned, the critical thing is the date. Is the 1st of August on the start date, to ensure eligibility. So perhaps if we, you know, perhaps one-on-one, if that's fair, to review the paperwork, certainly if it's Sheffield College, we're happy to review that paperwork, look at that, and make sure that you get exactly what you're entitled to.
Well, okay. I didn't do it through you guys, unfortunately.
That's fine.
That's fine. So the conversation you'll need to have is with your provider.
Okay.
So speak to your provider. Obviously, you know, should you meet the criteria, you should be eligible for those payments, and you'll have to work with them to arrange that.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Pick up the phone and speak to them, really. And get what you need, get what you're entitled to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, this is it. I wasn't aware that this was the case, so that's why I came on today. So thank you for that.
No, that's good.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm glad that's been of use for you. I have seen a digital hand raise up from Donna. So Donna, if I can hand over to yourself, if you'd like to unmute.
Yep. Hi. Thanks for the presentation so far. It's been really useful. I just have one question, and it is about like reserving the funds. So I'm not sure if I've misunderstood. We've got we've got a lot of money in our apprenticeship pot at the moment, which we're trying our best to spend, but where we've got money each month that is dropping off.
Okay.
So in that sense, I'm not, I wouldn't be reserving funds because I don't need to. But what you're talking about is if everyone is on top of the game, and they've got an amount in their pot that is a lot smaller, then that's when you would reserve funds. Is that right? Have I understood it correctly?
Well, you obviously pay the apprenticeship levy. Okay.
Yep. Yes. Yep.
So the funds are drawn down from your levy account.
Yep.
Yeah. So where employers have effectively a wage bill below 3 million, okay,
Yep.
they don't pay the apprenticeship levy, so therefore they are a non-levy employer.
Mm-hmm.
So when the funding for that apprentice, 95% is procured, so 95% comes from the government,
Yep.
and the employer pays a 5% contribution to that cost. So in terms of reserving funds, it's the non-levy employers that have to reserve the funds to enable them to recruit an apprentice and get the incentive payments through the Apprenticeship Service.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you very much.
That's interesting. That's an interesting point in clarification, actually, on that one. So yeah, thanks for your question, Donna. Tim, I've noted that your hand's been raised, so I'd like to hand back to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in. I think, was it Lynn was the previous point. I suppose sort of us as a local authority, we are an employer in our own right, and we are a levy payer, so we're trying to recruit apprenticeships. But a particular part of my role is to kind of get the message out there as well. So that was one of the reasons I joined. So where Lynn was saying, you know, she wasn't aware, we can support the activity of Sheffield College, other providers, the work you're doing as a chamber, and we want to try and get that message out there because it is a key priority for us in the district to get more apprenticeship opportunities, to get more employers sort of working with it. So I'm happy to pick up with Steve and you guys afterwards if there's anything we can do to help get that message out.
Okay, thank you for that. That's appreciated.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate your support there. It's useful. We always need to get information out to employers, so you know people don't miss opportunities that are available to them, especially from a funding incentive. So with that said, then, is there any other questions that would like to be presented to either Steve or Paul? In the absence of any hands going up, any digital hands, etc., I would say Steve, Paul. I think we've done a good job there. Then we've answered the questions, hopefully, that everyone had to put forward. So no, with that said, I would like to thank everyone for their attendance today. I hope you found that useful.
Yeah.
As I say, this content will be uploaded to the Sheffield Chamber of Commerce YouTube channel, so it will be available to play back if you'd just like to review the content. And obviously we'll make it available to a wider audience as well. Steve had kindly shared his contact details on the slides, but Steve, perhaps you'd like to put that in the chat function as well, so participants can gain access to those before leaving the call today. That might be useful. So if there's any follow-up conversations, like I said, that do need to occur, everyone has contact details and the means of functions to the Sheffield College. This will be the first, as I say, in a series of bite-sized webinars that we're delivering in this format. So hopefully the content has been, punchy and to the point. And as I say, we'll cover various topics as we move through. So please keep an eye out for future webinars that we deliver in partnership as well, if they'll be of use to you. But other than that, on behalf of Steve, Paul, the Sheffield College and Sheffield Chamber of Commerce, thank you for joining us today, and see you all soon.